welcome to Community Church Online. We're really glad that you are here, and if this is your first time, thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us. If you can, head over to communitychurch.net/connect after this is over. There's an online form there where you can let us know who you are, where you're from, how you heard about us. If you fill that out, we will send you a gift card for some coffee in the mail. Now, if you have kids, that's preschool, elementary, or preteens, all of our programs are online and there's new ones every week. Go to communitychurch.net/kids. Everything that we do as a church is made possible by those who partner with us financially. Now, if you're new, if you're a visitor, please don't feel any obligation to give. But if you happen to be a regular around here, Community Church is your home church. We want to encourage you to go to communitychurch.net/give to do your giving online. Lastly, enjoy the service. See you in a bit.
Come, let us bow at his feet. He has done great things. See what our Savior has done. See how his love overcomes. He has done great things. He has done great things. Oh, hero of heaven, you conquer the grave. You free every captive, break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. You've been faithful through every storm. You'll be faithful forevermore. You have done great things. And I know you will do it again. For your promise is yes and amen. You will do great things. God, you do great things. Oh, hero of heaven, conquer the grave. You free every captive, break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive.
Well, hey, Community Church, this week we're wrapping up our series called Being Right. And I don't know about you, but the past 6 weeks for me have been extremely challenging. These have not been easy issues that we're talking about. We're talking about some very practical things, some very good things, but also some very difficult things to apply in our lives. And every week I've been forced to think about how well or how not well I've incorporated some of these issues in my life. And frankly, I've had to deal with some of these. I've had to practice some of these in my own conflict resolution. And while it has not been easy, it has been good. And I hope it's been helpful for you. I hope that you have seen the benefits of incorporating some of these things into our lives and relationships as well. But this week we're wrapping up the series. And in case you haven't been with us, I highly recommend that you go back and watch at least part 1 and 2 of our series and then come back to this. But to just kind of give you a big picture version, what we're talking about is the importance of prioritizing being right with people over being right about issues. If you're a church person, somebody who follows Jesus, we talked about this example that he gave, this really hypothetical of a person who goes into a Jewish temple. Back then, he was Jewish. People worshiped in the temple. He's like, look, if you're going to go do this amazing act of worship, sacrifice to God, right? You're going to go there and you're going to do that. But you remember that somebody has an issue with you. He says, first stop, leave what you're doing there and go make it right with that person. He's talking about how important it is to be at peace, to be right with people. And not only is it just something we should do because Jesus says we should do it, but it is such a great way to live. I mean, think about it. What if our relationships, we didn't have to ruin relationships over arguments? What if we didn't have to have these prolonged periods of awkwardness and silence between parties because we don't know how to handle conflict in a healthy way? What if we did the work, the hard stuff, and learned how to be right with people, even when we disagree about issues? So we talked about how important that was. We talked about something called shame. Shame is a really important thing to deal with if we're going to talk about being right with people, right? We said that all of us have this internal desire to be right, to feel like we measure up. But shame makes us feel like we are not right, we don't measure up, and therefore we're not worthy of being accepted. And so what do? Shame is a painful thing. And so we avoid it like crazy, and that's what makes us unwilling to admit that we're wrong. And if we're unwilling to admit that we're wrong, we will never be right with people. And so we talked about how to deal with shame. That's a really big thing. And then the next week, we talked about kind of going to the next step. If we're willing to admit that we're wrong, then we talked about something called confession. Now, a billion things probably come to your mind when you think of confession, but we said in its simplest form, it's simply just stating your shortcomings, being willing to own what you've done wrong in that situation. And when we do that, it disarms the other side, right? The other side is now willing to admit where they're wrong. And it brings us that much closer to resolution. Then from confession, we talked about something called repentance, which is another glorious term that everybody loves, right? But if we put aside our preconceived ideas, we think about repentance in simplest form, it means to change your mind, And we said, really, our behavior is not determined by how hard we try, because trying, this trying only lasts for a little while. You might have tried to do something, you try for a little hard, but then you stop trying and you go back to the way it was. If we want to see lasting change in our lives and relationships, change that will require us to be right with people, in order to change how we behave, we have to change what we believe, right? It's a really big thing. And then last week we talked about conflict. We talked about being ready to rumble. Like, that's a good thing. We have to get that stuff out there, but we have to do it in a healthy way. And we talked about all the little aspects and rules of engagement and all that stuff. And hopefully that was really helpful to you as well. And now this week, we're talking about the glue that holds it all together. This is a really important thing. And when I say the glue that holds it all together, here's what I mean. Ready? Think about this. Hypothetical situation. Imagine you're like up in the clouds, okay? You're this all-knowing being up in the clouds. And you look down, you see everybody, and you see how they're interacting. You see like how they're playing with one another, how they're arguing with one another, how they're working with one another, how they're living with one another, all that, right? And you notice when people are doing things you would consider wrong, right? Now, how many of those things that you consider wrong are you guilty of yourself? Probably. If we're being real here, probably at least some of them you are guilty of yourself, right? We get mad at people for lying, but we lie sometimes, right? Or at least we get frustrated with people for being selfish, but we act out of selfishness pretty often as well. We hold people to a standard that we fail to keep ourselves. And so, what do we do about that? Do we just say, we all kind of blow it, right? Even if we don't all agree on the standard, there is a standard that we hold one another to, and we fail to keep it ourselves. Unless we're going to just throw the standard out the window, we have to have something that allows us to thrive in the midst of our failures. We're going to be right with one another. We have to know how to deal with when we get it wrong. And so today, what we're talking about is something called forgiveness. Forgiveness. Now, that's not an exciting topic, and you're probably not like, yes, I love forgiveness. Why? Because forgiveness is hard. A lot of people feel like forgiveness is weak, and forgiveness is definitely not fun. Why? Because we only need to forgive when we've been wronged, and who in the world likes to be wronged? So forgiveness. Typically, there are two types of people when it comes to forgiveness, okay? There are the people that don't want to forgive, right? Maybe you feel like forgiveness is weak. Maybe you feel like forgiveness is undeserved. Maybe you feel like forgiveness is unjust. Maybe you feel like it's unfair. And so you feel like there's no way I am ever going to forgive him or her for doing what he or she did. That was too great an offense. And so we are going to hold that against them forever. And that's a reasonable thing. That's a reasonable thing. It's not totally illogical to feel that way, right? Then there's other people that have decided, you know what? Forgiveness is a good thing. I want to forgive. Or maybe you feel some kind of religious, ethical, or moral responsibility to be forgiving, and you want to forgive, but it is hard to forgive. Maybe you've tried to forgive, and you think about this issue, this thing that someone has done to you, and you're like, all right, I want to forgive them, but then you see them, right? And it's like, oh, and it just crawls. You feel the anger kind of crawling up, and you're like, I'm trying to forgive them, and it's hard, and it's not easy. So there are people that don't want to forgive, and then there are people that have difficulty forgiving. So what I want to kind of present to you today, and those are both like very reasonable things. I think that pretty much covers everybody. There might be those people that find it very easy to forgive, but if that's you, I can't relate to you, and so probably you're going to get nothing out of this message, but congratulations. Anyway, for the rest of us, what I want to look at is why we should forgive, like the goodness that comes out of it, and how to forgive. And hopefully that will at least give a little bit to all of us here. Why we should forgive and how we should forgive. Before we do that, though, we have to talk about what forgiveness is not. Two things. One, forgiveness is not pretending that something did not happen. And two, forgiveness is not just suppressing something and refusing to acknowledge it. Some of us think like, okay, if someone does something wrong to me, my responsibility, if I want to forgive them, I just have to forgive, ready? Forgive and forget. You ever heard that? That's a cool statement. It's catchy. There's a nice flow to it. I think that's alliteration, right? Forgive and forget. But it's really not practical, and I would say it's probably not wise. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say I drop my kids off. Got two kids, Logan and Mia. Let's say I drop them off at my neighbor's house, and this is not true. I have wonderful neighbors, okay? But let's say I drop them off at my neighbor's house, and as soon as they get there, they take my kids and they lock them under the staircase like Harry Potter and just kind of feed them breadcrumbs. And when I come back, they tell me, oh, we've been under the staircase the whole time. We've been crying, and they don't care. And so I confront them about it, and they say, yeah, you know what? That wasn't very nice. We probably should not have done that. Will you forgive me? I would say, ideally, eventually, I would say, yes, I forgive you. However, it would be unwise for me to leave my children with them a second time. It is not a good idea to forgive and to forget, right? There's more to forgiveness than that. The second thing, forgiveness is not just suppressing something. And this kind of has to do with what we talked about last week. It is unhealthy. if somebody wrongs you, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's one of your employees, somebody wrongs you, it is not healthy to just say, okay, they did that, I didn't like them, and now I must forgive them, so let me just, and we like push it down and we don't address it. There's a problem with that. Why? Because they don't know often that they've done something that has been an offense to you. And so they really have no reason to change. And they don't know that there's a debt, that there's a wrong, right? So what we have to, again, last week, what we have to do is confront it and say, hey, I've got to let you know this was a problem, right? And then after we get it out there, we can move on, right? Then we can forgive. But forgiveness is not step one. So we should not pretend an offense didn't happen. That is not forgiveness. We also should not just suppress an offense and not acknowledge it. That is also not forgiveness. So then, the question, what is forgiveness? What is forgiveness? Well, we see forgiveness really in two different types of ways in the New Testament. They're two totally different terms, but we translate them both to forgive. The first one is actually Tom talked about this earlier in the year when we talked about anger, like back in the olden days when we met in person. It's in a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the Ephesians, and here's what he says. He says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. Now that term comes from the term meaning grace or a gift. It means like literally to give freely, like to give the benefit of the doubt, to give someone something they don't deserve, kindness, compassion that they did not work for. And so if I'm going to forgive you, like let's say, like kids, let's say my son does something bad or something that he's not supposed to do, right? We talk about it, and then I give him this kindness that really he didn't work for. It's grace. It's undeserved good treatment, okay? That's the first concept of forgiveness. The second concept of forgiveness comes from a prayer. Jesus' followers asked him how they should pray, and Jesus gave them a model. You probably have heard this before, especially if you have any kind of church background. It's in the Our Father, or what a lot of people refer to as the Lord's Prayer. Jesus says this is how you should pray. And in that prayer, he says, forgive, talking to God. Here's how you should pray. You should say, forgive us our debts or trespasses, depending on how you want to translate that word. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Now that term just means to leave behind or to let it go, right? Elsa, right? Let it go. And it's tied specifically to the object of the verb, the debt. So it is to let go of a debt that someone owes you. And throughout the rest of the New Testament, we see forgiveness, like offending and forgiving. We see it explained and spoken about in the context of a debt-debtor relationship. Debt-debtor relationship. And just understanding that, I think, will help us understand forgiveness, a debt-debtor relationship. So in light of what forgiveness is not and what forgiveness is not pretending that there was no debt, right? Forgiveness is not acknowledging a debt. Forgiveness is the undeserved removal of guilt or a debt. The undeserved removal of a guilt or a debt. But we have to acknowledge that there is guilt or is a debt. And here's what I mean. A lot of us hate the concept of forgiveness. And probably, if you don't even like talking about forgiveness, probably it's because something really painful has happened to you. Something that maybe has had lasting, damaging effects. Something that has caused a lot of hurt to a lot of people or affected you in ways other people will never understand. And when you hear forgiveness, a lot of times, maybe what you're hearing is people like minimizing the pain and the hurt that you have felt. And that's not a healthy aspect of forgiveness. It's important to recognize there is a debt, there's an offense, there's guilt. I've been treated in a way I should not have been treated. And because of that, I have lived with, or maybe right now I am living with pain because of the offense of that other person. And what we cannot do is minimize that. We cannot minimize that. But when we address it, and we address the damage that it has caused, it is extremely beneficial to forgive, not easy, but to forgive the debt. Undeserved removal of debt. Now, why? Why should we do that? Maybe you're like, that is weak. I don't want to do that. It's not good. They don't deserve that. I'm not going to remove their debt. Here's what I want you to see. It is extremely, extremely costly to carry a debt. It is work to carry a debt. A lot of people who study the realm of psychology and who also study what we call theology, right? Like the writings in scripture. A lot of them are making the argument, like it almost seems like psychology is catching up to theology, because there are a lot of things that are written here that are like, okay, God wants us to forgive, so let's forgive. But now they're seeing like, hold on a second. There are tons of benefits to things like forgiveness here. And this is the case, obviously, with forgiveness. What we're finding right now, they've only started studying this, like it started in the 1980s, right? But what we're finding is that people who do not forgive tend to struggle way more with things like depression, anxiety, and even have a weakened immune system. It takes a toll on our lives to carry around debts. Often, when we demand other people should pay, we are the ones who end up paying for it. And not only that, but we end up being captive to our own emotions. And I'm sure you've experienced this before, right? Maybe it's your family, someone in your family, or maybe it's even you. And there's people around and everybody knows, okay, that uncle or that cousin has an issue with so-and-so, right? And you just sit there like hoping no one brings it up. In fact, if there's an issue, everyone in the family probably knows you don't bring that up, because if you do, he's going to explode. And you hope that that person never walks in. Or if they do, it's like, okay, he's going to be in that room, she's going to be in that. And you know, and everybody's got to kind of adjust to it. And think about it. Who wants to live that way? Like, if I have an issue with someone, why do I want to let the mention of their name or their presence in the room, why do I want to let that determine how I feel? Right? There's often what happens is there's this anger, there's this bitterness, there's resentment that comes to the surface, and it's a trigger. It's a trigger. It's like, well, I've got an issue with Bill, right? And so if you bring up Bill, well, now I'm angry. And why? Why do I want to live captive to the people that I have chosen to not forgive? I am the one paying a price. It's the debt-debtor relationship. And we talk about it like it's a debt-debtor relationship, right? What do we say? If I wrong you and I want your forgiveness, what do I say? I owe you an apology. Or I'll say, like, let me make it up to you. Or we'll demand payback, right? A debt-debtor relationship. And when we hold those debts against people, ironically, we are the ones who end up paying for it. It ends up hurting us. So often, when we choose to forgive, often we are the ones who benefit from it. If you know people, like I'm sure there are people in your life who just like, maybe you know them and there's just like there's a lightness about them, right? There's just this joy. There's this satisfaction. They're just like free. They feel free emotionally. Those are not the people that are holding things against other people. Or maybe you've met someone that is holding things against other people. It's like they're a bartender with all the open tabs, right? Well, this person owes me that and this person owes me that. And you'll sit down with them and you'll talk to them and you will be drained within 5 minutes, because it's like, you want to know what my sister did? My sister came over here and you know what she said to me? And then my neighbor, she threw this over the fence and so. And why? Because we are just keeping track of what everybody owes us. And if you sit with those people, there's a heaviness about them. It's unhealthy. No one wants to be around them. They drain themselves and they drain the people around them. They are the ones paying for the debts that they are demanding. They're the ones that are paying. So that's why, one of the reasons why I think we should forgive. It's a good thing. It requires strength. It's not a sign of weakness. But then maybe you're one of those people, like I mentioned before, maybe you're like, all right, I get it, I want to. But how? Like every time I try, and this is me, this has been me, it is me, frankly. Like there are people that hurt me, like, all right, I gotta offend them. And I like sit in my chair, like in a dark room, be like, all right, let me think about them, let me think about what they've done. And it's like, let it go. Like, let it go. Just like, and we'll try and convince ourselves, right? Once, I'm not kidding. Once I took like an offense, wrote it on a piece of paper, and I burned it. And I'm like, maybe if I watch this burn, it will make me not like feel angry. Maybe then my emotions will follow what I watch. We try and we try and we try and we try. And here's what I want you to see. The key to forgiveness is less about the person that needs to be forgiven and more about the person who is trying to forgive. When I'm trying to forgive, it's more about the way I see me than it is the way I see them. Here's what I mean. If you look at how Jesus explained forgiveness, what does he say? He doesn't just say like, forgive, right? It's in light of something else. He says, speaking to God, he says, forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors, right? And then more clearly, Paul writes, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ, God forgave you. He wrote a letter to the Colossians. He says almost the exact same thing. Forgive just as you have been forgiven. We are not told to forgive independently of who we are. We are told to forgive in light of who we are. Or maybe you could picture it like this. This picture like help me, right? Here's the question. In like the courtroom of life, where am I sitting? Am I sitting in the seat of the judge who decides what people deserve? Or am I sitting in the seat of the one who is to be judged? If I'm sitting in that seat, wherever that seat actually is in the courtroom, right? No one ever sitting in that seat feels the need to judge other people. Why? Because we are at the mercy of the one being judged. The idea of forgiveness, right? If we want to be the people who are the kind of people who forgive, what we have to decide is that, like, I need to understand that I am not the one who decides what you deserve. I'm not the one who decides what you deserve. And this is the part, and let me just stop right here, right? If you're not somebody who follows Jesus, I've said this a few times already in this series, this might be a little bit hard for you to like wrap your mind around. Maybe you like totally don't buy this, but just hang with me for a minute, right? If there is someone who knows the ugly, like the ugliest of the ugly about me, right? Who knows the worst of the worst, and he looks at me, and he is sitting in the seat of the judge, and he looks at me and says, because of Jesus, right? Because of my love for you, I do not hold that against you. I decide what you deserve, and I am not going to give you what you deserve. Instead, I'm going to give you love. I'm going to forgive you. Your price, your debt has been paid out of my love for you. And if we're sitting there and we understand ourselves in that seat as people who really have done a lot wrong, like all you got to do is really sit and think about your last 24 hours and realize how many times we have fallen short of the way we really want to live. And if God knows that and doesn't make us like feel guilty, doesn't like, shake his finger at us, but looks at us and says, I love you. I know what you deserve, and I'm not going to give it to you. Instead, I'm going to love you and hold none of that against you. If we are in that seat, then that will change the way we see other people, because we're not in the seat of the judge. We're not sitting in that place in the courtroom. So where do you sit in the courtroom of life? Not only am I not sitting in the seat of the judge because God is, but I am not a very good judge. My vision, maybe this is like a more logical thing, like maybe if you're not somebody who is bought into the whole idea of God and Jesus and paying debt and all that, like if you're not there, that's totally fine. But just like we have to recognize how limited our vision is and really how bad we are at judging. I'll give you an example. Like one time I was in another church and there was someone in the back. I wasn't on stage speaking, but I have been on stage speaking. And a lot of times there's like, when there's a big commotion going on with the people, a lot of times it's hard to just tune that out and try and remember what you're talking about. It can be really distracting to the people on stage. And so I get what it's like to be up there and I'm sitting in my seat and I hear like a lot of noise coming from the back. And I'm just like, when are they gonna pipe down back there? Like and I'm like, and finally I get up, I like move toward the back, and I'm just like, and I've got all these feelings of how could they, and I'm starting to get angry, I'm starting to get annoyed, and because they don't care, and now people are distracted, people are looking back there, and it didn't take me very long once I got back there to understand that the person who was there was with a child with severe developmental disabilities. And I stopped for a minute and thought about how hard it must be for that person to get out of the house every day, right? And what a risk it is for that person to go and sit in a setting like that, and what it costs them to get there, and how many times they've probably been in situations like that where there are people looking at them because their child is making noises, and now they've got to decide, am I going to go out to church and be like treated like this, or maybe it's the movies or wherever, because everywhere they go they're treated in a similar way. And all of a sudden I realized, holy cow, my vision is so limited. I am not in a position to determine what this person deserves. I cannot see the whole situation. And when we refuse to forgive, what we are saying is there is a debt you have to pay, and I know what you deserve. I am the one who determines what you deserve. But if we see ourselves as the person in the seat of the one who could be judged but is not judged, the person who's let off the hook, if we don't even see ourselves in the seat of the judge, we're not going to lean toward deciding, well, this person deserves that and this person should do that. Because we are not the ones who should be doing the judging. I saw a Joker. I saw a movie a little while ago. It's called The Joker. It was a really difficult movie to watch. And the whole idea of it is basically, this might spoil it a little bit for you, but it tells the backstory of the Joker. And what you see, there's no real like super great happy ending, the Joker. It really like just doesn't end well. It's unsettling the whole time, kind of leaves you unsettled. But it was a helpful movie for me to watch. Why? Because you see the pain that turned him into the villain. You see like the abuse that he goes through, the rejection that he goes through his entire life, which ends up turning him into the kind of person that he is. And obviously it's a story that's not true, but that principle is true, right? There are people in our lives that have gone through such horrible things, and their way of responding to it is a destructive way of responding to it, but they're acting out of hurt, right? Hurting people hurt people. And if you were to just like watch a Batman movie, right, you'd be like, oh, Joker, what a terrible villain. He deserves to be like put in jail, right? He deserves like the punishment that he gets because but if we will like just understand, hold on a second, forget the Joker. But think about the villain in your story. The person that you don't want to see. Person maybe you haven't spoken to in a while. The people on the other side of the issue that's bothering you right now. The people in the opposite political party. The villains in your story. We are so quick to decide what people deserve. To sit in the seat of the judge and say, well, I'm right and they're wrong. And I know why they believe what they believe, why they've done what they've done, what motivated them to do that, how they came to that conclusion. And as the all-seeing judge, I decide what they deserve, and they owe me. All of us have villains in our story. People who will mistreat us. People who will hurt us, will offend us. If we're sitting in the seat of the judge, we will never show them mercy. But if we're sitting in the seat of the one who is being judged, who has been shown mercy, and we recognize the fact that we are just bad judges, we'll be so much quicker to forgive. I've mentioned this before, maybe you've heard me say this, like a lot of people, when we understand our relationship to God, a lot of people see it as like an, if I blank, then he will, right? If I do enough good, well, he will like me, he will love me. If I do this, that like it's like us initiating and him giving us like, okay treatment, right? But really the whole idea of Jesus, of Christianity, is not if I do like live up to a certain standard, then he will. It's because I will. Because, and not like if I obey him, he will love me. It's because he loves me, I can obey him, because he's proven that he's on my side. He's in my corner, right? It's not if I forgive, he will forgive me. It's because he's forgiven me, because he's canceled my debt, I can cancel the debt of others. That's the glue. That's like the foundation of what we believe. And that's the glue that holds our relationships together. That's what will allow us to find healing in our difficult situations, in our relationships at home, in our marriages, in our relationships at work. It's a process. All of this is a process. And like I said, it's challenging, it is difficult, but it is good. It is good. So that's our series. I hope that this has been challenging for you. I hope that this has given you something to think about. And I hope that these things, these principles, are the framework, are the lens through which you and I will see our relationships, our situations at home, our situations in society, in our culture, and at work. And I hope that we will see how great it is to be right, not about issues, but to be right with people.
Hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining us online. If you are new to Community Church or have not done this before, please go to communitychurch.net/connect to let us know who you are so we can keep you informed and can send you a cup of coffee to say welcome. Have a great week and we'll see you next time.